Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Islam in Life with me, Raza Ghazim. Muslims have major challenges to face from the narrative of secular modernity that is propagated by the Western establishment. This is done through Western media outlets and through those in the Muslim world who either sincerely support that view or arguably, more often than not, support the propagation of this view through others because they're enticed by the financial benefits on offer. So what is secular modernity? Is it at odds with the Islamic viewpoint?
Modernity is one of the major challenges facing the Muslim world today. Contrary to common belief, Islam is not against modernity. This is clear from the narration of Imam Ali, who states that when raising children, parents should not raise them as they themselves were raised. They should keep in mind the modern environment in which the children are growing and raise them in accordance with that. Basic values and principles of Islam and its moral framework cannot change. But there is always room in Islam for new thinking in all walks of life, from politics to social interaction.
Being a Muslim and living in the West can be a challenge, but it depends. Everyone needs a balance in their life. So I think to see the laws in Islam and implementing it in your own life, that's the real balance.
It's our duty to see how can we work out our our Islamic habits and the things we want to stick to without having to completely compromise on our identity at the same time. But I don't think that they're at odds.
We're actually modest, and then modernism comes in terms of your education or how knowledgeable you are in Islam or to what extent you're studying, and that is real modernism in Islam.
We're joined by our esteemed guest, Professor Tariq Ramadan, to discuss these matters. Welcome to the program.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam. I want to start off very simply. What is secular modernity?
It's not a simple question because there are two notions here that are coming together, and both notions are loaded with history, understanding, and ideologies at the same time. So if even we start with modernity, very often when it comes to modernity, it's confused in the discussion and the debates that we have now in the world with the Western way of dealing with modernity. In fact, modernity means living with your time, but modernity means in Western standards the primacy of the individuals. It's all about freedom, his or her freedom. It's progress, which is also something which is important. Rationality as the starting point of everything when it has to construct a universe of reference. Rationality is central. And then comes, very often when it comes to modernity, in Western terms, secularization, which comes with secular modernity. And
can I just interrupt there? All of those things that you're talking about in terms of modernity, is that a problem, or are these all okay?
From an Islamic perspective, we don't have a problem with them if and only if we are clear about balancing them with other dimensions. So if you say, for example, the primacy of the individual, that's fine. At the end of the day, as Muslims, we all think that at the end we will come back alone before God. وَكُلُّهُمْ آتِهِمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ فَرْضًا. Any one of us will be alone. But if individual ends up being individualism, that everything is, you are the center of everything, that's not going to work. So it's exactly the same with progress. We don't have a problem with progress. We don't have a problem with freedom. We don't have even a problem with rationality. But if rationality ends up being rationalism and an arrogant rationality, saying, I get it all, from the French philosopher Descartes saying, I am going to build the whole building of truth, and I will be able to get it out of my rationality. Say, no, that's not possible, because we need revelations and we need God. So it's all a question of balancing. So the problem that we have with modernity and modernism in Western terms, it's not about some of the notions. It's that there is no balance. There is something which is an understanding that we are pushing too far sometimes. Things that are at the beginning positive and at the end they could end up being negative. Add to this that among us, when it comes to secularization, it is understood in the West that the only way you get democracy and democratization is through secularization. But you need to understand, and especially the people who are not living in the West, in the global South, that this is very much the Western history. Why? Because the main religious presence was the Roman Catholic Church, and the Roman Catholic Church was a clergy, and the clergy was taking over the state. And in fact, it was a dogmatic way of dealing with power. So the confusion between the two is that the one who was running the country in the name of God, and meaning, so representing God on earth, which is completely opposite to what we have. We, as Muslims, we follow in the footsteps of the Prophet. We are not representing God. We are the successors of the Prophet, ﷺ, meaning it's completely different. We acknowledge the fact that the way we deal with the state is in human terms inspired by religious revelation and principles and rules. So being inspired and following this doesn't mean that we end up thinking that we are beyond humanity and we are going to be dogmatic in the way we are imposing. That's not the way. So we also have to understand that the process of secularization came into the West, where in fact the Catholic Church was imposing power onto the state, and that this separation was the only way within the Western society to get pluralism, tolerance, living together, which was not the case. In fact, if you come back to the very beginning of Islam, in Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, made it clear that the Jews, the Christians, and people of other faiths had their place within Islam. So it's not a dogmatic imposition of Islam onto everybody. So we have to understand that secular modernity, as you said in your introduction, is very much connected to the West, and this understanding that anything which has to do with religion and power means dogmatic imposition of religious belief on all is something that we don't know in our history.
And this term, although loaded, as you've said, secular modernity, is it one big monolithic construction?
No, that's a very important point as well, because we talk about, even myself now, I was talking about the West. We have to be very cautious with this, because in fact the principle of secularization is everywhere in the West. The translation of this process of secularization into institutional models, this is specific to every country. For example, the French called laïcité, or the secular system, has nothing to do with the British one, and the British has nothing to do with the Swedish one, and all this had nothing to do with the American one. So the process of secularization is different. But for example, in the United States of America, the reference to religion is completely different from the European countries, because they don't have the same sometimes rejection, and especially in France, because it's an old story. So many Muslims, or French Muslims, they think that the French state is against them. But in fact, it was even before they were there that the French state had a problem with the church and the Catholic Roman Church. And this is a very long story. So we need to understand that there is something in the relationship with power and the power struggle between the church and the state in the West, and especially in some countries, that we need to take into account when we speak about this. Add to this that for them, in the West, there is something which is very, very difficult to get, is that for example, in the Islamic history, it was not when there was not involvement and ethics in politics, what we call a siyasa al-shar'iyya, which is inspired through our belief that this is why we had more justice, more pluralism than what we have now. It's, in fact, in the Muslim majority countries now, all the secular states are dictatorships today. So it's exactly the other way around. If you look at our history now, it's not religion that it's imposing, these are dictators. And mainly what we have in Muslim majority countries is that dictators are using the secular, the Western secular model to impose onto people things that have nothing to do with their own history, and they are very arrogant in the way they deal with their people. And dictatorships as the political model is the rule that we have with the secular importation of the Western model.
And in terms of from the Western construct, because that is a manifestation that you can say has happened and has been exported from the West, to those countries, and different aspects have been taken on board. But how does it manifest itself in terms of having implications for people in the West in terms of that secular modernity? So what is, how does it impact on you or I?
No, that's very important. Why? Because in fact, first, the discussion about the private and the public spheres. That's a very deep discussion here, by saying, you know what, your religion is your private sphere. And the public sphere is the state, is where we negotiate. So you can decide for your spiritual authority in your private, but it should not be visible in the public. And then you say, okay, hold on. It should not be visible. What does it mean?
But that's a French thing, isn't it? Perhaps
no,
more
even,
than
no, that's exactly the point. Exactly what we have now is the French are very, very tough on the visible thing. But for example, in my country, Switzerland, which is not the French country, they decided that the mirrors are not to be seen. So we don't want to see this. In the UK, the whole discussion of Britishness has to do with what? The visible presence of Muslims who are now. So there is a factor of, in fact, and what I have been saying is that with our presence in the secular society and being visibly religious, it's as if we are shaking the whole philosophy of separation, and in all the countries. So this is why headscarves are the way we dress, and even our presence, and even if you are going to. So in some countries, like for example in Britain, the visible side of your the way you dress, that's fine, because there is an old history of British colonialism dealing with these differences, but it doesn't mean that there is no problem. So it's more subtle in the way the people are thinking about the Muslim presence, because if you are asked day in, day out, are you truly a British? What are your values? Behind this, this is exactly the question that we have. I'm not going to talk about the way we dress, but the way we think. So are you thinking in these terms that you are differentiating between the political power and the religious reference? And are you first Muslim or are you first British? That's exactly a secular question. It's a secular question. And a human question would say, I'm both at the same time, and there is no problem. So we need to understand the mindset, the psyche, and it has an impact on three things. First, the mindset, the collective psychology. Second, on the institutions, is what do we teach, for example, and in which way we are teaching. It's something which is very important. And the third is religion in the public sphere, is religion in our life. It's as if religion are on the margin of our life. We can do whatever we want, but the religious reference in our discussion in the West, and especially in Europe, is much less than what we have in Muslim-majority countries in the global South, and even sometimes that what we have in the public discourse that you can find in the United States of America. So we have to differentiate between the countries.
I'm going to come back to one of the points that you made about state and religion, but we do value your opinion that you share with us on social media. Here is what you sent us this week.
This week we asked, is Islam compatible with modernity? Yunus from Libya said, Islam is the same always, and there's no modernity in it. We may find out things we didn't know before, or better ways of doing things, but that's not modernity. That is still Islam. Sharifa from Canada said, it depends on what you mean by modernity. Islam is a modern religion in that it is dynamic, so that means it's able to incorporate modernity. But this is not the same modernity that the Western world practices. And Amir from Netherlands said, this is a very tricky subject. Modernity is compatible as long as this does not take you away from basic principles of the religion. Modesty, for example, in dressing, must always remain, even if dress styles change. That's all the comments we have for this week. If you'd like to have your comments featured on the show, be sure to follow us on Facebook or join us on Twitter.
One of the things that you talked about is the idea of how the state and religion are being separated or have to be separated within this construct of secular modernity. Why is that obsession there?
Because there is something which is very important. When we are talking in the West about separating state from religion, in fact, the deep question is not about the state as a state or the religion as religion, is power and authority. Who has the ultimate authority? So is it an authority that is coming from on high, so you have nothing to say? Or is it something which is negotiated from among the people? So what is, so we have lots of scholars, when they were dealing with the whole history of Islam, they were saying it's a mix between something which is religious and something which is secular. Why? Because we have something, amruhum shura baynahum, meaning that the Muslims, when they come together and they want to decide something, they come together and they decide in the majority process, which is in the West secular. In Islam, it's, yes, we know that there are some decisions that are coming from on high, al-ibadat, for example, and things. And when it comes to our social affairs and mu'amalat, we have to organize ourselves. So we need to understand that our history as Muslims has nothing to do with the very difficult time people had under the authority of religion. So it was a question of who has the power to decide. And to tell you, you know what, you, as a Protestant, you have no right to stay here, and we are going to impose. It was the same. Who were the driving force of the secular ideology in the West? Protestant and Jews. Why? Because they were minorities. Saying, look, the majority is imposing onto us, and there is intolerance in this society. While on the other side, what we have in our way of dealing with religion is lakum dinukum waliya din. You have your religion, we have our religion, and by all standards, coming back to our religion, this diversity is a duty for us to respect, because we cannot impose onto people. So we have a way of dealing with the authority which is very important. And it's very important also for us as Muslims to make it clear that we are not confusing the authority when somebody is leading a country. He or she is elected, so the people have a say. And there is freedom, freedom of conscience and freedom. We have this rooted in our traditions. So we are not going to have the same models as in the West, because we don't have the same references. But there is something which is intrinsically there in Islam. We don't confuse God's power with humans' power. That's essential, because we don't have a church coming and imposing in the Shia tradition as well as in the Sunni tradition. We don't have. This is not Islam. This is coming from the West.
Is it not just another point, this idea of secular modernity, is it not just another point of view? Because it seems to me there is an impression that it's more than that. And why is that seen or perceived as a threat to the Muslims? And if it is seen as a threat to the Muslims, how does it need to be addressed?
Of course it's a threat. It's deeper than just a thought. It's a whole philosophy of life. It's to tell you, you are going to be free if you free yourself from the religious reference. We are saying the opposite. My freedom is coming from my reference and the way I'm at peace with myself, the way I'm using my mind. So at the end, the whole way you look at yourself as a spiritual being is also the way you are going to say, it's not only a question of power, it has to do also with the economic system. Because we talk about this, secular modernity, as if this has nothing to do with the economic power and is something, that's complete, this is rubbish. That's not true. The whole political system has to do with the way you are going to deal with the economic system. And we, as Muslims, we say, no. Behind this ideology, not portraying itself as an ideology. Oh no, it's rationality, it's objectivity. This is science. Say, look, don't let us think that there is no ideology behind sciences, no ideology behind rationality. So we understand here that it's a very deep discussion about step by step sidelining anything which has to do with the spiritual, the religious, and even the transcendence. At the end, it's humanity talking and producing their own rules in the name of rationality. And this is why we have to be clear that it's deeper than a thought. It's an ideology that at the end, the whole process of secular modernity, it's to make it humans for humans with no God. At the end, that's the reality of it. And if you do this, the ultimate reference, it's going to be lost. So we are ready for pluralism. We are ready for rationality. We are ready for dignity. We are ready for all this. But the way we say La ilaha illallah, there is only one God, means we want ethics in everything. So don't tell us there is freedom in the political system, but there will be no freedom in the economic imperial order that you are imposing on the order that we have now. Because even now we have to be quite serious about that. Is it true that in the West we are so free? Is it true that now we are voting for the people and we are electing people that we want? Are they doing what they want, or are they doing what others want, where there is no democracy? In the economic world, there is no democracy. They don't speak even about, so it's a very powerful reality. And my problem with the secular model now is that you don't want religion, but you don't have a problem with economy taking over, and it's in fact power now, political power, are under the authority of economic power, and this is the development that we have in the West today.
One of the things that happens with this is the assumptions are there. You have common ground on some of those points, and so they will say the religious point is not common with us, so let's just stick to the commonalities between you and the other, with the people who are talking about secular modernity. So religion gets left outside. So we haven't really changed the narrative or done anything to address how do we change the level of the discussion, because certain assumptions are made and that's where you start from. How do you change those starting points and question them, because that's where the problem lies, surely.
You are right. And I think very often we end up talking about structural differences or commonalities, and that's not the point. The whole thing, it's the paradigm. I would say even it has to do, in a very difficult word, is epistemology. From where do you get your knowledge and how do you deal with your knowledge? That's essential. And this is why Muslims should not only enter into the discussion by saying, oh, you know, we have common values and that's fine. And no, it's deeper than that. It's a cosmology. It's the way you look at the world. It's the way you are, you think that you are Khalifa fil ard, vicegerents. This is very deep. It's not only management, it's something which is behind this, and then we have to challenge the narrative. That's exactly the point that I want to make. We have to challenge the narrative of the whole discussion, is that the way we look at human beings, the way we look at ethics in action, it's the way we look at the whole thing. So we should not end up discussing democracy as a structural, technical structure where the people are voting and that's it. This is what they want us to do. Say, oh, no religion in this. No. We want to go to and discuss the deep freedom. Deep freedom is not only to choose who is going to run. It's deeper than that. My personal freedom, and for me, the personal freedom is also the spiritual life that I have within the society, and not only in my so-called private life. So we have to go deep in this discussion, and unfortunately, the Muslims today, when it comes to this discussion, we are very superficial. We are very Either we are on the defensive, oh, we don't have a problem with all what you said, individualism and everything. So this is when they are scared. What you were saying in the introduction, this is what we have. Or we end up saying, oh, no, this has nothing to do with us. And in fact, we end up distorting the universal message of Islam and making it something which is alien to the West. While in fact, if we were serious about the West, you can see that many people in the West, they are very close to what we are talking about. They know what it means when we speak about spirituality, when we speak about freedom, when we speak about dignity. They acknowledge the fact that the political structure is alienating them under the authority of economic power, where there is no democratic process in the economic power. Many of our fellow citizens, they know this. So we better come to deep questions and getting with us many of our fellow citizens who understand this, and they have exactly the same feeling as we have, is that the problem is deeper than only the structural organization of the secular state.
One of the things that's going on is that you're not being given the space or the ability to be credible. So how do you try and get that space to have your narrative being put out there, very briefly?
That's very difficult, and this is why we have to find, we have multi-levels. It could be through writing, being active within the society. I would say to the Muslims, don't only speak as Muslim within the West with this your own narrative. Speak about everything. Challenge with and through where you are with your understanding, your cosmology, your understanding of what it means to be with God, but with your ethics as well and your principles. Be involved in all the discussion in the West, because at the end, if you only speak about Islam, you are confirming that you don't care. You just care about this, and then you have nothing to propose into the society. So we need to be present. We need to speak out. We need to be on the media. We need to have channels where we can express ourselves, and we need to connect to the people, and not to end up doing with people what we don't like them to do with us, essentializing them. All the Muslims are like this, so all the Western people are like this. That's wrong, and the starting point is to change that.
Lots of interesting points, lots of interesting demands that you're making. Have we really answered the big contemporary challenge to the Muslims? I'm not sure that we have, but I do think some of the problems associated with secular modernity have been articulated. The development of the concept of secular modernity is based on Western historical experience and development. There is an inclination to impose this history onto the world. Why? Surely we need to start challenging the very parameters of the debate that we are engaging in. That is all the time we have for today's discussion. I would like to thank Professor Tariq Ramadan for being with us, and thank you all for watching. Until the next edition of Islam in Life, it is goodbye from me.